Hello and welcome to the Field Guides. I'm Steve and I'm here with Bill and Daniel.
Morning, Steve.
Good morning, Steve.
What we're going to do today, and over the course of many future episodes, is take you out into the field, in the woods, and on the trail. What we do every episode is we pick a natural history topic, do research on that topic, and share with you everything that we learned.
And in this episode, we are once again where Bill and I were exactly a year ago, it seems, in my favorite place on earth, Everglades National Park. So we are once again getting a field trip episode for this one. And I feel like we've been doing a lot of those lately.
Yeah.
So we've been very fortunate. So again, thank you to all the Patreon supporters for helping make episodes like this one possible.
Thank you, Patriot.
Yeah.
Previous listeners, you may remember that it was just Bill and I. We were not fortunate enough as to have Steve. What do you got?
So the orchid, the monk orchid.
Oh,
A
I was thinking, is it a snake? Yeah. Oh, very cool.
Sorry, it's not a snake, all right? It's huge.
So, very cool.
All right.
What was I saying? Yeah.
Back to the reptiles.
Yeah, back to the reptiles. What I was saying was, previous listeners might remember that pretty much exactly a year ago, just Bill and I were down in Everglades National Park in South Florida, and we were talking about the Florida panther. So we just went on a little walk through the pine lands in the northern part of Everglades National Park in Homestead, Florida, sharing the details and everything we've learned about that animal. But we're in a different part of Everglades National Park now. Folks that haven't been there, the reason why this is my favorite place and the reason why I think this is becoming an annual thing with Bill and Steve and the Field Guides here is Everglades National Park is an incredible place to visit. It's about 1.5 million acres, and we are especially focused on the Homestead entrance. There are two main entrances to the park. One is the Shark Valley entrance, and we are at the entrance near the city of Homestead. And we love this place because, as Sandy would say, it is a mosaic of habitats. You can drive 40 miles down the main highway through the park, see so many different plant communities, and as a result, a high diversity of wildlife, different types of wading birds, different reptiles, different animals. And in this episode, we are down almost all the way to the end in Flamingo, focusing on an animal that, believe it or not, is bigger. It's one that I did not even know existed in the United States until my first trip to the Everglades in 2017. Bill, what is our focus animal today?
It's the American Crocodile.
American Crocodile.
Nice.
And I'm hoping people are going, man, I didn't know we had those here either.
And I do want to jump in because you mentioned Sandy. So longtime listeners will know that Daniel's referring to Sandy Geffner, who Steve, Daniel, and myself, we all had during our time as undergraduates at the University of Buffalo.
Well, we should say how long ago, though. How long were you for you, Bill?
It's almost 30 years.
And I think for me, it's almost 13 years.
Yeah.
For me, it's 7 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I think he's responsible not only for us being who we are, partially, but also our love for the Everglades. Because
Absolutely.
all of us took a class that Sandy leads each year to the Everglades. So we were all introduced to this special place by Sandy Geffner. So shout out to Sandy.
Yeah.
And it was my introduction to American Crocodiles. It's kind of funny because when we were going to be paddling up the Buttonwood Canal down at the Flamingo Marina, he had said, we are going to be on the lookout for American crocodiles. Thought he made a mistake and he meant alligators because I had no idea that we had crocodiles in the U.S.
Right.
I mean, every time you see them on TV or hear about them, you're learning about the ones off in, different countries. So, a little bit more time goes on. He says the same thing. We're going to be on the lookout for American crocodiles. And I was bold enough to, raise my hand and go, hey, Sandy, don't you mean alligators? And he said, no, Daniel, smart ass. he didn't say that. He said, no, American crocodiles, a totally different species. And that totally stunned me. And my time working in the Okefenokee swamps, I've met a lot of people that were on their way down to Florida. And, a lot of people were not aware that we have this animal that only occurs down in South Florida. So I figured it would be a great animal to talk about in this episode here.
And am I right that this is the only place in the world where American crocodiles and American alligators can be found together?
It's the only place in the world where a crocodile species and an alligator species are found together.
Cool. So another reason to love the Everglades.
Now if you turn into a real nerd here, you could say, well, caiman are a member of the alligator family, and they coexist with crocodiles down in South America, but... Yeah. No, we're talking about, actual alligators. So maybe we should get into where we are first. I mentioned that we're down in the southern part of Everglades National Park. We're hiking what's called the Bear Lake Trail, and to get to the American crocodile habitats, you need to venture down far south where you start to enter the brackish environment, so water that has a little bit of salt in it. So the further south you go, the less alligators you see, the more American crocodiles you see. They like these salty environments down here in South Florida.
And the gators prefer the more freshwater.
The freshwater, yep.
Yeah, okay.
So where we are, it's the Bear Lake Trail. We're actually on a real narrow trail right now, which is pretty interesting, fitting us three guys on this trail here. But we're hiking down. It's pretty overgrown, and we're surrounded by a lot of mangroves, which are a real charismatic species and a species of vital importance. To me, I don't know about you guys, they kind of remind me of they look like spiders interlocked, along the sides of the waterway. They have these really long, the red mangroves, which we're looking at, have these really long what are called prop roots, and they descend down from the trunk of the tree and dig into the soil and or peat, and that's what gives them the stability to live in an environment that's constantly battered by hurricanes and storm surges and other things.
A lot of them look like they're standing on tiptoes.
They do, yeah, like on stilts. So, Bill, you got a mosquito on your nose.
Oh,
Just want to let you know. And more of that to come for sure.
Yeah.
But these mangroves play a crucial role in not only harboring habitat for spawning fish and for American crocodiles, but for protecting coastlines from storm surges and hurricanes as well. So this is a great place to see the mangroves. We're hiking our way down, trying to get to the actual Bear Lake itself. There are crocodiles in this area. We don't know if we'll see them here, so the plan is, if we don't encounter any, we're going to move over to the Flamingo Marina near the visitor center there, and that's where it's probably one of the most reliable places in Florida to see American crocodiles. So that'll be our plan. But I wanted to start it with making a mention of a book where I got a lot of my information from. See, I had read a lot of misinformation about crocodilians. I've been really interested in them since a young age. I love Steve Irwin and the Crocodile Hunter and all that. But I had found out that a lot of the stuff I was reading about them, even in books, was not really accurate. So I had asked a friend of mine, what book is reliable? What book has, more of the heavy science and that sort of thing regarding crocodilians? And he recommended a book called The Biology and Evolution of Crocodilians by Gordon Grigg. And in this book, it has hundreds of works cited, some of which being, around 2008 or so, which is after a lot of studies of crocodilians took place. But not only does it tell you what we know, but it's good at telling you, we don't know. This is still a mystery, those sorts of things. To get what the science is showing you, about these awesome enigmatic reptiles is a nice feature to have. So if you're somebody that's interested in crocodilians, this book could be like your holy Bible. I mean, it's a nice one for that. And at the very start, Greg has a paragraph that I think kind of sums up crocodilians and our perspective of them. Few animals are as charismatic as crocodilians and as poorly understood by the general public. Everybody knows what a crocodile looks like, that they grow to awe-inspiring dimensions, and that they sometimes eat people. But once the conversation around the table goes beyond the danger of becoming a croc's dinner, all you are likely to hear is a succession of myths. Crocodiles, you are told, are just a special type of giant lizard. They are living fossils, unchanged since the age of dinosaurs. Cold-blooded, dim-witted, lazy, lying in wait for unwary African explorers. Simple and primitive.
Bill and I actually talked about this on the way up. 100% both of us agree with that.
We're going to end the episode here.
Yeah. And that's all, folks. Thanks for listening.
Do you end up talking about phylogeny at all? Like how they're related to other reptiles?
I'll break down the order Crocodilia.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't go much further beyond that. I'm sorry, Steve.
No.
I know that's a heartbreaker.
Yeah, Bill and I were talking about it a little bit on the way down, so I'm excited to chirp in when you get to it.
Please do. Absolutely. Yeah. But first, let's describe what they look like. Although, as Greg says, most people know what a crocodile looks like. They're lizard-shaped with a long, muscular tail. That tail is pretty much like half their total length. And 4 short legs that have 5 toes on the front feet and 4 on the back feet. They have a relatively long snout that's more so V-shaped, with a raised, rounded hump in front of the eyes that appears and what I've heard to be a little bit more distinct in males. Their dorsal scutes, so those things that look like spines on their back that make them look like a dinosaur, they're irregular and they're often asymmetrical, and it looks like they're missing, like a spot that should have a scute, doesn't have one. Their color is like an olive, an olive green or tannish. Usually the ones I see are tan. You can have some variability there. The hatchlings are about 10 inches long, but when you get to maximum sizes, here's where there's some uncertainties, and this is kind of true with crocodilians across the board. So males, usually it's 16 feet, which is a gigantic crocodilian. But there are many old claims. I found this in Griggs' book, and field guides say this. I found different articles online. There are older claims of 20 feet in length. And that is a massive, massive animal, which would put it at over 2,000 pounds. So you're talking about a really large crocodile.
Wow.
But down here in Florida, where we're at the absolute northern tip of their range, they rarely exceed 14 feet. Breeding females, which are smaller, as in the case of all crocodilians, the males are larger than the females. Breeding females will be like 8 to 12 feet long. So that's a little bit of a description there. Their range, Central American from Mexico to Colombia, Cuba, Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, and then, as I said, as far north as South Florida. So being a tropical reptile, they can't handle the cold of anywhere further north. There have been some sightings as far north as, nearly Orlando. That's pretty far. So, when they're born, I mentioned they're 10 inches long. So, they can be eaten by lots of different things. Large wading birds, otters, raccoons. But being in the brackish and coastal environments of South Florida, they're now open to larger, saltwater fish. Like jacks will take them, sharks will take them, even blue crabs will take hatchling American crocodiles. But their biggest threat has historically been human hunting. That was a big one, for their skin, their hide, as well as just, that's a scary animal, so we have to kill it.
Right.
Habitat loss, especially the development of the South Florida coast. They used to nest on the Miami beaches, up to that area now. And now, of course, that's just not possible. So changes in the hydrologic structure, that was a big one too. So all the draining of the water that flows through the Everglades, the different dikes that were created, the canals, altering the hydrology, that really hurt their numbers as well. They're an endangered species. In 1975, there's about a few hundred of them. Now they believe there's about 2,000 adult crocodiles. But when it comes to population estimates of crocodilians, it can be difficult because of the terrain that they live in and how cryptic they can be. So yeah, threatened species, their population, has been expanding, which is good to hear, because it would have been sad if we lost, one of our 2 crocodilians here in the United States.
Yeah.
So their diet, like all other crocodilians, is going to change as they age. So when they're smaller, they're going to be taking things like insects, small fish, smaller crustaceans. As they grow, they're able to take on things like mammals, people. Yeah. They'll take things more like, turtles, bigger crabs, birds, sometimes small mammals. Fish really appears to be the main source of food for them, especially down, in the Florida regions. They've also found in the stomach contents of American crocodiles things like mangrove seedlings and gastroliths, so like rocks. And there are different theories as to, is this just bycatch? You clamp down on a fish or something in vegetation and you swallow the vegetation along with it. Is there more going on? There's also a theory with the rocks or gastroliths that 1, they may aid in digestion, or 2, they may aid in buoyancy control. Because, of course, for a crocodilian to sink down into the water, they have to let out air, which depletes some of their oxygen storage. But perhaps if they have these heavy stones in their stomach, they might be able to submerge without losing more oxygen. So that's something that's kind of been tested in different ways, but that's one of those things, that we don't know.
Tested in various ways. What do they do? Load up some with rocks and some with
ball bearings.
No way.
Yeah. They loaded some up with ball bearings.
I kind of said it because I was
tested
like, this is crazy, but...
Yeah. I think they did it with saltwater crocodiles.
Wow.
I came across some of those studies. So I wanted to find a couple of the studies about their diet. And this is pretty interesting here, how they do something like this. So this was from a paper that I found called The Food Habits and Ontogenetic Dietary Partitioning of American Crocodiles in a Tropical Pacific Island in Central America. So I took this right from the study here, talking about how they do these dietary studies, and it sounds like a great job. So stomach content samples were collected following the flushing method. The animal's mouth was opened using ropes or bare hands, depending on crocodile size, of course, and a piece of PVC tube, adjusted by size, was inserted and taped around the mouth to keep it fixed. A flexible PVC tube lubricated with vegetable oil was then gently inserted into the mouth, opening the velum palatinum and passing through the esophagus and the cardiac sphincter until it reached the stomach. The animal was tilted up 45 degrees, and water was pumped throughout the flexible PVC tube until the stomach was visibly distended, massaging it to create a stomach content water mixture. After this mixing, the animal was tilted down 45 degrees to collect the mixture coming from the other end of the tube into an empty container while massaging and pressing the stomach, parentheses, Heimlich maneuver, to help the stomach content move out easily. This process was repeated 3 or 4 times until water came out clear.
Whoa.
This method has proven to be safe and highly effective, recovering up to 95% of prey and non-food items from crocodilian stomachs.
I wonder how the crocodile feels about that.
Yeah, probably not great. I wonder if afterwards they put it back. Like, they like shove all the food back in the crocodile's mouth.
But I mean, the one good thing is a lot of times stomach studies are done on dead animals, and these are done on living.
Imagine the croc afterwards. It's like, no, I got to eat all those rocks again. Are you kidding me?
Come on, yeah. They had a lot of different statistics about it, but it's kind of the classic trend that you see. Insects and arachnids, they found insects in 17% of small juveniles, 15% in large juveniles, and then 3% of subadults, 4% of adults. So you can see the insects being an important part of their diet and tapering off. When you got into larger sizes, you started to see some mammals appear, but in small percentages. 4.1% of the adults had evidence of mammal prey in there.
Whoa, that's it?
So, yes.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, they're mostly, that's one of the things people, when you think about crocodile, you're thinking about the saltwater crocodile, Crocodylus porosus, or a Nile crocodile, taking on large prey that you see on TV, especially the Nile crocodiles. You see them take zebra and all those things.
Right.
Like, those are 2 very different species.
Yeah.
And those 2 species are the primary reasons why people have such a fear of crocodiles. Not that the others can't be dangerous. They can be, especially in certain situations, but those 2 are in a league of their own in terms of, what they can do, what they have done physically, and the threat that they, display for people.
Got it.
So
you said 4% of their diet is mammals?
And in this study, 4% of the individuals had evidence of mammalian prey.
Oh, got it. And
Yeah.
only 4% also had insect prey.
So-
evidence of insect.
Of the adults, there's even more. It was 8.2%.
Oh, wow. So you're
Yeah.
less than an insect to them,
Yeah. So, it's they don't have the ability to chew. They have these very powerful jaws that people, are very familiar with, the famous powerful bite force of the crocodiles and alligators. They want to bite something, crush it, and then swallow it whole. That's what alligators want to do. Fish, frogs, and turtles for gators. The crocodiles, they're going to be doing this with fish and with crustaceans and smaller stuff. It's a hassle to take down a larger mammal.
Right.
They're a large, powerful, opportunistic predator. So if a specific opportunity arises, they're going to do it. But it's not a significant part of their diet. Not for American crocodiles.
Can they do the speed roll like you see?
The death roll?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would imagine so, just because I've seen alligators do it. It seems to be something that might be ubiquitous about crocodiles, but I can't say for certain.
You got to tell people what the death roll is if they don't.
The death roll,
It's sushi.
if you never watched The Crocodile Hunter, when they bite onto prey, I mentioned that they can't chew or really tear. They'll latch onto, if it's like larger prey or they maybe come across a dead animal, it'll bite onto a piece of it and it'll rapidly barrel roll. It'll rotate, and that will allow it to dismember pieces of a larger prey animal.
Yeah.
So
I've seen one take off a person's arm before. I don't know, on like YouTube or something. And I've also seen one take off another alligator or crocodile's arm. I think they were going for a thing that was in front of a group of crocodiles, and it grabbed onto one's arm by mistake and spun. And
These are Nile crocodiles you're talking about.
no, I don't know what they were, but
Okay.
I'm one of those people that doesn't know much about alligators or crocodiles. So, and the one that got its arm eaten off, didn't even seem like it was phased. It was a crazy video, though. It was pretty scary to watch.
I have seen that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like bit onto I think it was like the back leg, death rolled, ripped it off, and the one it looked like it didn't even stub its toes.
Is my-
oh no, my
Is my
leg's
leg gone?
Yeah.
Can you look back there?
Yeah.
So I'm glad to know our feed is almost equally messed up, Steve. It makes you feel better. Another food study I found, this took place down in Mexico, and they captured 21 crocodiles from different environments in that area. The stomach contents were obtained to identify prey animals in the same way that was mentioned earlier, and in decreased order of importance, it was fish, crustaceans, birds, mammals, and then insects. So it's going to depend where they are. In this study, insects were the least important. So they're going to be eating what's around them, but fish, universally seems to be their most important food source there. And children. No, just fish. So I've mentioned a little bit about where you can find them. They do have that wide range that I mentioned earlier. And, they can be found in fresh and brackish waters. They're not exclusive to salt water, but that's typically where you find them are brackish and salty waters, coastal waters, coastal lagoons, mangrove swamps and burrows, and the rivers and estuaries, normally close to the oceans, which again, that's one of the key differences with American alligators. Oh, who's this?
Is this the Atala?
It looks like it, doesn't it?
Orange-bodied, but bright blue spots on wings.
It's one of the endangered butterflies here in Florida.
Yeah. So when caught
I think that's who that is.
Yeah.
So when caught in a spider net yesterday.
Yeah. I think they call it a
spider
net. Wow.
You call them what you want to call them, and I'll call them what I want to call them.
There is, he just landed.
There he is, yeah.
Florida
Beautiful.
Atala. Yeah, they have the larva, folks, bright red. It almost looks not real.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
We can post a picture if we want,
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
That's the other thing we have to mention. Being down here in the Everglades, we're constantly, on the lookout for things, even as we do this. And when we walk down this narrow trail that has little patches of sunlight on the side, we're looking for snakes, basking along the side. So as we go, in addition to talking about American crocodiles, we got to be looking around us to see what else is going on here.
And Daniel, since he's kind of been down here the most, there's been several times where you've warned myself, I don't know about Steve, where you're like, Bill, watch out for snakes. You're walking there, watch out for snakes.
But also, why don't we just give a quick summary of the snakes we've seen and maybe other notable ones that...
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we haven't had a lot of snakes this year, unlike last year, Bill. We had tons of them. But the notable one that we came across actually at the Fakahatchee Strand in southwest Florida was a juvenile cottonmouth. And that's one of the venomous snakes down here. That's the venomous snake we encounter the most. And they like more of the, swampy, wetter areas of the park.
Also known as the water moccasin.
Water moccasin. They're the same thing, and no, we don't have them in New York. Those are water snakes. Very different, not venomous. Please stop shooting them.
Brown water snakes, although they are aggressive, aren't they?
So northern water
They
snakes?
can. The northern.
Did they change?
Maybe that's what it's called.
Okay. Yeah, I knew them as northern water snakes. They are aggressive. They're the ones where, I always said that when it comes to garter snakes, which I've caught a lot of both growing up, maybe about 30% of garter snakes will try to strike, 100% of water snakes strike. And you can actually feel their bites. It hurts a little bit more. They can draw blood. So, so we saw, that's the only venomous one that we saw. However, our good friend Rich, a friend of the podcast, he found a dead coral snake and was extremely excited to show us a dead coral snake.
It wasn't just dead, though. It was roadkill. It was flattened, baked in the sun, nothing left of it. Other than the color pattern, which very specific, red on black. So red, black. No, what's the
Don't
order?
let your ketchup and mustard touch.
So,
That's what I like to say.
So yellow and red touch on the coral snake?
Yeah.
Okay.
Red touches yellow, you're a dead fellow.
Yeah. That's harder to remember than don't let your ketchup and mustard
I do
touch.
like that.
If you're a simpleton like me, that is.
Rich and I did go out birding early this morning, and he did tell me when Sandy picked it up and was getting into the bag, the head of the coral snake slammed against Rich's thumb. And then later on that day, he's like, my thumb was tingling, and I'm wondering to myself, how long can this venom last for?
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, I think it was just a hangnail, though.
They're the ones where you hear that their venom is a neurotoxin. It can shut down your ability to breathe, and it's potentially the most dangerous, but they have a very low rate of envenomation when they bite. That's something that I read. I have no idea how true that is, but that's one of those ones where it's like, aren't they the most dangerous ones? It's like,
imagine getting gummed by a coral snake.
I think they really gotta get you on a diamondback or something. They can just kind of quickly thwack you and boom, you got it.
And am I right? Shout out to the timber rattlesnake episode, the timber rattlers. They have the fangs that come out. Coral snakes do not have those fangs, right?
Yes, they gotta really chew to envenomate.
Okay.
That's something that I heard.
So what other snakes did we see?
The rest that we saw were non-venomous. We actually just saw a garter snake, on the way out to this trail here at Bear Lake. And we've seen, I think they were Everglades racers.
Right.
The Everglades racers.
A
couple of them. Beautiful snakes. Yeah, they had this kind of bluish coloration on top. They were white on the bottom, and they had these big eyes. And our good friend down here, JT, who is our snake and herp guy, and he was telling us those big eyes, they're a sight hunter, those sorts of things. So.
And I didn't see it, but JT did also get that rough green.
Yes.
snake, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, on
Which
the
was a
road.
cool one too. Yeah.
In years past, we've encountered a lot, especially on trails like this. That's why I'm really on the lookout. The dusky pygmy rattlesnake. That's a small rattlesnake species, and they're usually coiled up real small. And only once have I seen an eastern diamondback rattlesnake. That's the big one. You know, when everybody hears rattlesnake, that's like the one that they're thinking of. So that's here as well, although I've only just seen one. It's easy to forget that you need to watch where you step here. It's not something to be totally afraid of. It's just something you have to be aware of. Look where you're going. You can't just walk off trail like you do in Western New York here. So
Well, no, you do that in Western
It's
New York. You got to watch
interesting.
out for ticks.
That's true.
Snakes
That's
are the
true.
ticks of the Everglades. Well, I will say the first time I ever came to the Everglades, that first morning, I was walking down a trail. Just no one was up yet, so I just went on a walk for myself. And on my way back, my heart almost exploded because there was this pretty massive yellow snake laying across the road, and I guess it was a yellow
Yellow rat snake?
rat snake. Yeah.
It might have been lumped in with all the other eastern rat snakes now, but I knew it as a yellow rat snake. Did it have two
Yeah.
black lines going down the side of it?
I thought I remember it. I took tons of pictures, but I
Yeah.
thought I remember it being all yellow. But
Huh.
just a memory, and those are very fallible.
And I have to say, maybe some listeners will disagree with me. I'd rather take snakes than ticks any day.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And it sounds crazy until you're down here and it's like, oh, the sky's not falling with rattlesnakes. They're not jumping out of trees on us.
Right.
We want to see them. We don't see them. We haven't seen a rattlesnake yet this trip. So,
I don't need to see ticks. I want to see rattlesnakes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time you see a tick, it's on you.
See, I would rather the ticks because I can treat my clothing to keep the ticks away, but I can't really treat my clothing to not get murdered by a snake because that's what they do.
All right, that's a decent point. So now I think for Steve, I'll hop into taxonomy here. So the American crocodiles, along with all the other crocodilians alive today and some of their extinct relatives, belong to the order Crocodilia. This order separated into three families about 100 million years ago. One family is Alligatoridae. This is broken down into two subfamilies, our alligators and our caiman.
Yeah, and one of the things I really like doing when I start tackling a new group of animals is I like to just get an idea for how many there are, or I guess how few there are in some groups. So I think we have the two alligator species, right?
Correct.
But aren't there only maybe like 8 caimans in the world? I think there's 6 or 8 caiman.
I think there's 3 genuses: caiman, Paleosuchus, and
Genera.
Melanosuchus. Genera. Sorry. What did I say?
I've done that before. You said
Species?
genuses.
Oh, genuses. God.
I've done that before too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Genera.
Do you want to leave that in?
So, of course we're gonna leave it in. Anytime I make a fool of myself, we have to leave it in. So,
Yeah, so there's the 10 species in the alligator. I don't know how to say it.
I used to say Alligatoridae.
I think that's right.
But I've heard people say Alligatoridae. Does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
It's like
Yeah.
having an alligator a day.
And then there's only 2 gharials. Is that how you say it? Gharials?
Yes. It's gharial. You'll see sometimes in the writing gavial, and the family is Gavialidae. It was a mistranslation
Oh.
that was created, and for some reason,
And what are
we
those?
can't change it. They're out near like India, out in East Asia. They're named after, I think it's called a gara. It's a type of pot. They have a very, very slender snout with big teeth, and the males especially have a really pronounced like bulb that looks like that pot at the end of their snout.
So Steve and I were talking about this with JT, and he was saying that they're adapted for eating just fish. That's like pretty much all they eat.
Yes, but again, they are opportunistic. And a gharial has killed a human being.
Oh.
So, and like
whoa.
you look at that teeth, they just look like it's for quickly snapping up fish. Like that's their predominant diet, and that's true. But they're not going to say no to other things all the time. Like they are opportunistic. In the evolutionary history of crocodilians, you could see how important head shape is, for the prey that they're chasing after, because that's a big difference that you see amongst different species. You have all these different head shapes and different types of jaw lines and such.
And let's tell people what are caimans.
So caiman they live in South America, and again they're in the same family. So they look like the alligators. They're freshwater. They're going to be living in the more freshwater environments, but they behave much like our American alligators do. Being in the same family, they look pretty similar too.
When I was down here in 2003, in the Fakahatchee, one of our people in our group got a video of a caiman.
There are caiman down
So
here.
we think it was released, probably.
Yeah,
Whoa.
I think there are some breeding near Homestead too.
Sandy didn't believe it until
That's
he saw
so-
the video.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
At one point, there were Nile crocodiles found near the Everglades in Homestead.
Everything survives in the Everglades.
Again, Homestead, we talked about this with possibly like importing illegal cats, pet escapees and stuff, and you have that with different reptiles, and they can survive. So you have somebody illegally harboring Nile crocodiles, they get out or you release them, and they're going to hang around. But I think all of them were captured and destroyed. So.
Nice. Imagine if someone released like a Burmese python or something.
Man, that would just totally destroy all the small mammals in the Everglades. That would suck.
That
Thank
would
God that
suck.
hasn't
Yeah, sheesh. Yeah.
I'm sure if it did happen, they could all just be killed real easy.
Probably.
Yeah, we should look into this, and if something like this has happened, maybe a future episode or something. Yeah.
So yeah, that was the alligator family.
We covered 2 families?
Yes.
There's only 1 family left,
One
right?
family left. And that's Crocodilidae. That's who this one belongs to. This is a family with 3 genera. One is considered the true crocodiles, and this is Crocodylus, and that's the one that our animal, Crocodylus acutus, belongs to. So Steve, what do you think acutus means?
The opposite of obtuse. No, I like skinny or sharp or pointed or something.
Yeah, pointed. I knew you would know that one.
Yeah.
And that refers to, again, that kind of pointed jaw shape that they have. A lot of people say it's more so along the lines of a V there. I looked into the etymology of crocodile or crocodylus, and there's 2 Greek words. Kroko means pebble, and delos meaning worm. So pebble worm is now my favorite nickname for crocodilians after this. Now that we've mentioned kind of the other...
Well, I also saw it when I just briefly looked into it, that there's somewhere like 18 species of crocodile.
Of crocodile?
Yeah.
Okay, I know there's 28 crocodilians. I don't know how many of...
So my number came to 30. So sometimes those numbers are wrong with groupers and splitters and stuff. So I think it's kind of really interesting to think like, okay, how many crocodilians are there in the world? And there's only 30. For all I knew, it could have been 100. But like that's a relatively small number of crocodiles.
Yeah.
But I want to go into something really, really, really quick before we move on to the rest of all your stuff.
Sure.
So, you started the episode saying how alligators are like living fossils, right?
That was in your quote, right?
That's
It was a
one of the
quote.
things people think about them.
So, and this kind of gets into that a little bit, is that if you know the answer, let me know what you used to think. And Bill, you could also chime in. But when you think about a crocodile, do you think that it's something that's very ancestral? Like, do you think it, and by that I mean, do you think it's an early brancher or late brancher within the reptile clade?
I thought it was an early brancher. Like, they branched off a long, like millions and millions and millions of years.
Yeah, because like the family, the order Crocodilia split up 100 million years ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I mentioned that quote earlier, he was speaking about that along the lines of the misconception that alligators are the same way they've been they predate the dinosaurs.
Right.
It's like, no, they have relatives, ancestors that look similar and behaved similar that predate some of our dinosaurs, but it's not that our alligators or our crocodiles have been around before that. But please give us insight of what you were saying.
If you know anything about evolution, you can't stop things from evolving. So it's not that they haven't changed, but maybe they have similar... They're still under similar like pressures, or I don't know. They have similar phenotypes to things that maybe existed a long time ago. But the answer is, I would say, before looking into it, I thought that they were probably early branching reptiles.
That's what I thought.
But it turns out they're about as nested in reptiles as you can get, and they're actually the sister clade to birds.
Yeah, I knew they were more closely related to birds than reptiles.
Birds, they're the most closely related group to birds than any other reptile.
Yeah.
So hang on, because what you just said, Daniel, I think you want to clarify that. You said they're more closely related to birds than reptiles.
Oh,
yes.
Birds share a common ancestor with crocodiles more closely than anything else.
Right.
Oh, so that would be true. That means crocodilians and birds are equally related to the next group up.
Yeah, so that was the 3 families, and then earlier I think you mentioned 2 in the Gavialidae family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are 2. It used to be 1. They used to think Tomistoma was in the Crocodilidae, but that's now in Gavialidae.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You're correct.
The gharials and the crocs are more closely related to each other than they are to the Alligataridae.
Yes, that's true.
And
you
know
found
what?
30 species though. That might be more accurate because this stuff is changing all the time.
But I will say,
my book says 28, but my book came out in 2015 or something like that. So I mean, Well, one of the things is that it shows the success of their adaptations, that they haven't changed too much over a long period of time.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
a lot of the other crocodilians, they share a lot of things in common, a lot of their different adaptations, and they're found in many places all over the world. So it just kind of shows that, this is a pretty efficient way of living, and it's worked out for them. So, but I wanted to get into, as Bill mentioned earlier, discussing the differences between alligators and crocodiles. So I'll let one of you two chime in for this one.
yeah.
All right. So, Daniel, jump in and tell me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've
Sure.
spoken this out loud.
Yeah.
So, alligators are usually darker in color. They have a snout that's more U-shaped, and then their fourth tooth is not exposed. It's the fourth tooth on the bottom part of their jaw is not exposed when they close their mouth. Whereas the crocodiles have more of a pointed, narrower snout. They're typically lighter in color, more grayish or light green in color. And then when their mouth is closed, that fourth tooth on either side of their snout is exposed when they close their mouth. So,
And that's the only thing I knew about the differences before I think ever coming to the Everglades. I think when Sandy said it, that more just cemented it. But it was something that was the one thing that I think I knew was about that one tooth, the fourth tooth that sticks up for crocodiles and not alligators.
and crocodiles actually have like a notch in their snout, right? For that.
I think it's a notch in the bone, the upper bone, right?
There's a lot right there.
Okay.
Yeah, you got a lot right. So first of all, you have to be super specific, which I know is annoying, but American crocodiles have a more V-shaped snout, and American alligators have a more U-shaped snout. So you can make that distinction. But there are other crocodile species, like Crocodylus palustris, the mugger crocodile, that have more of a U-shaped. And then there are also some caiman species, which are in the alligator family, that have, I think it's Paleosuchus trigonamus. They have more of a V-shaped jaw.
So those comparisons work in the Everglades.
In the Everglades, yes, they do. So if you were to say American alligator versus American crocodile, you're correct.
Got it.
With what you were talking about, the jawline there, for all members of the alligator family, and they say this is the best way, for alligator family and crocodile family, for all of them. The top jaw teeth of all members of the alligator family are visible. They hang down from the top jaw. But all the teeth on the bottom jaw are not. They actually go into little pockets in the upper jaw, so you can't see them when the mouth is closed at all. Now, I have seen some alligators with some pretty messed up teeth. They're kind of poking out in funny ways, so you can see. Versus with crocodiles, their teeth are more so interlocking because the bottom teeth do kind of slide up into grooves of the top jaw, and that fourth bottom tooth that you mentioned is especially conspicuous. It really sticks out. So that's the one you see, obviously, but then if you look closer, you can see, all the top and bottom teeth there as well.
And folks, if you get a chance to look at the pictures that go along with this episode and our episode notes, that's one thing you can look for. So we'll post pictures of both.
Perfect.
Because as we've been taking pictures, I've been thinking, these are pictures I'm going to want to post so people can see the difference between the two.
Another thing that we can do too, with the pictures that we took, because Bill and I and Steve, we actually got a really good look at 2 American crocodiles at the Flamingo Marina, where we might go later, and one was big. I mean, that bull was maybe 13 feet long, easily 12. We got really close photos of their face, and when you see on the face of alligators and with crocodiles, they have these little organs on their scales. They look like little black dots, almost like somebody took a Sharpie and put dots on them there. These are called integumentary sensory organs, and they're super organs. They allow the alligators and crocodiles to hunt at night because it can pick up on different pressure changes and vibrations that their prey makes around them. It's when we almost stepped on a 9.5-foot alligator today in the Cypress Dome, and we were watching it, and a fish just swam by the side of the gator's head, and the gator just quickly turned and snapped and tried to take the fish. It could do that in the darkness. The crocodiles can too. There is also evidence to show that it can detect potentially the salinity of water and the pH of water. So that's what helps them maybe navigate through waters of different salinity. So it really is a super organ. And that's what allows alligators and crocodiles to be super sensitive and careful when using their mouth for things like helping their young. Alligators will pick up eggs with the hatchlings still kind of working their way out and work the egg over in their jaws to help the baby alligators come out. And other crocodiles do this too. So it's like you have a super strong bite force, the strongest bite force in the animal kingdom, but you can also gingerly help a baby get out of an egg. And that's in part because of these integumentary sensory organs. A big difference is crocodiles have them all over their body. Members of the alligator family only on their head. So that's a big one. So you can post a picture of what they look like. So it's interesting to see. And the thought is their common ancestor had them all over, so the alligator family lost them along the way.
Didn't need them.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Easier to lose something than to gain it.
Yeah. It's just, you think it would be beneficial, though, in pretty much any aspect of your life, but that's one of the mysteries. You know, we don't know why that's something that would have been lost.
I mean, I've said this plenty of times, but it's sometimes evolution is just random, you know?
Steve loves when we come up with stories for why
right.
evolutionary changes happen.
It's fun to come up with adaptive stories, but to be honest, you know, adaptation is only one, it's the only non-random force of evolution, right? So, but all the other forces of evolution are random. So yeah, evolution is non-random, but only sometimes. So, you know, it could have just been that they just happened to lose them because there was a population that kind of sprung up without them, and then the other populations didn't pass it on. Yeah.
It's interesting to speculate. So I think let's move around a little bit. Maybe look for some other wildlife. Maybe we'll come across a snake if we're lucky. And when we get to our next spot, we'll talk about another key difference between the two that plays a really important role in crocodile ecology.
All right, cool.
So as we kind of slowly work our way back down the trail, I wanted to talk about another big difference between the alligators and crocodiles. And again, this is a big feature regarding the habitat preference of American crocodiles. So I want to talk about salt tolerance, because I think was Bill that mentioned earlier, you find alligators more so in freshwater, and then when you get into the brackish and saltier waters down in South Florida, that's where you start to enter crocodile habitat. So this kind of story goes back to the 1950s when a physiologist named Knut Schmidt-Nielsen, I believe, and his colleagues...
His first name was Knut?
K-N-U-T, unless it's Knut.
Maybe
Newt?
Maybe Newt.
Newt?
I know someone named Knut.
I live under a rock.
I prefer Nut.
I prefer Knut.
I hope it was Nut.
Newt. Okay, Newt or Knut or Knut.
I'm going to change
sure.
my son's name to Knut.
Perfect.
Nut Fleck.
Oh, God, please. That's too perfect. Well, him and his colleagues, whatever this distinguished man's name may be, they first discovered salt glands in cormorants because they were trying to discover, like, how is this animal able to spend so much time in salt water without dying of terminal dehydration. So after this discovery, he was speculating that crocodiles probably had something like this as well. And this is especially the case because in the 70s, there were a lot of observations by field biologists of young Crocodylus porosus, so saltwater crocodile or Indo-Pacific crocodile. The Australians call them salties. That's how a lot of people know them. They were happily living in hypersaline waters in an Australian river. So larger individuals, it makes more sense. They have a larger body mass to surface area ratio, so they can tolerate salt better. And also their skin being heavily keratinized, like on the outside, that slows down the water loss that occurs through their skin, the efflux, and it also slows down the influx of seawater or salty water. So it was said that big ones can tolerate this. Why are these young ones able to do it as well? So there were some thoughts that the concept of crocodile tears, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, maybe this is the case. After all, that's how marine turtles do it. They excrete they have salt glands in their eyes. And that's why, like, if you've seen videos on Animal Planet or something of marine turtles crawling up a beach to lay eggs, they're always crying. It's like that's the salt glands at work there. So, but this wasn't the case. There was experiments in the early 1970s that disproved this by, trying to sample, from the eyes to see if there's any evidence of salt being excreted from there. The guy that did this, Bill Dunton from Penn State, he also injected the crocodiles he was testing with, I think it's pronounced methylcholine, and it's a drug that they thought would be likely to stimulate secretion. So none of his findings suggested the operation of salt glands. So people are kind of confused by this.
We're walking along a canal here, folks. A boat just went by.
Went like really fast.
Yeah.
So he came to the conclusion that salt glands must not really do anything. But more field studies kept finding crocodiles in hypersaline environments, so they were like, they have to be. They totally have to be. There was one study that they did with young saltwater crocodiles. Actually, the author of the book, Gordon Grigg, did this, and they captured young saltwater crocodiles in different areas of an Australian river, one being more freshwater, one with a little salt, one with more salt, and then one that was heavily saline, and tested the blood and urine, and they had similar readings throughout. So they're able to osmoregulate depending on where they were.
That is so crazy.
So they're thinking, this has to be the operation of salt glands. But it wasn't until 1980, a man named Lawrence Taplin discovered salt glands of Crocodylus porosus. Where do you think he discovered them?
In their eyes.
Butthole.
I knew I was going to get something funny, that's why I asked. Their tongue.
Oh, wow.
So why do you think it took all the way to 1980 for this?
Because they weren't looking there?
Why wouldn't they be looking there?
I don't know.
What do you
dangerous.
do? This is the hypothesis. What do you do with a crocodile when you capture it? What's the first thing you do?
You open its jaws and put your head in and...
Exactly. No, Steve, what do? You tape its mouth shut. You close its mouth so you don't get bitten.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So nobody wanted to look there.
So
That's
the
last place you want to
the
look.
thought didn't really come about until this man, he taped the mouth shut but propped it open a bit, and when he injected that methylcholine or whatever it's called, a clear salty fluid flowed from the surface of the tongue.
Wow.
So they discovered, yes, there are salt glands and they're on the tongue, and this is what helps the crocodile survive in salt water. So
Can I defend my guess really quick? Why
Yes,
I said
you can.
butthole? It wasn't random, and it was sort of being funny. But if you want to know, you should check out our SAP episode, because we also talk about osmoregulation. And do you remember the group? The plant hopper nymphs excreted excess sugars out of their anal gland.
Right.
Yeah.
So you weren't totally out of left field.
I know. I was kind of making a joke, but like, I've seen it in another species, another group. So,
Well, in Steve's defense, the cloaca, which is, I guess, the equivalent of a butthole to crocodiles, does play a role in osmoregulation.
Oh, cool.
All right.
But it's not where it's excreting high amounts of salt.
Yeah.
So
Tell me about that butthole, though.
that had a lot of big chemistry words and all that kind of stuff, so I didn't get too heavily into that. So yeah, they found out, these saltwater crocodiles have these salt glands, and when he did experiments on saltwater crocs and American crocs, he found that the concentration of salts in the secretion were very similar. So this led to the idea that American crocodiles are probably as salt tolerant as saltwater crocodiles, especially given the environments that they live in. However, because captive American crocodiles didn't do so well in saline environments, in like controlled lab experiments in the 70s, it was thought that these salt glands probably aren't doing too much, especially since they were found to excrete salt through an injection of that methylcholine. So I found papers, in the 1980s that said American crocodiles have salt glands, but they don't seem to really do much. But what they found is that when you take a young crocodile out from the wild and put it in captivity, it's not behaving naturally. It's not feeding, so it's not a good indication of how they actually do in saltwater. The guy that was doing these studies, he also kept a 3.4 kilogram American crocodile in full strength seawater, and after 5 months the animal started feeding well and growing and was highly energetic. So it showed that there was a flaw with this experiment that they did there. See something, Steve?
Oh, no, probably.
So at the time they thought, well, it's because this animal was larger, not because of special glands. But that was kind of the first clue that yes, these salt glands must do things. And when you look at some other studies that took place off of like an island in the coast of Belize, there were small American crocodiles that during the dry season had no access to fresh water, and they were eating mostly animals like prawns and blue crabs, animals that have a high sodium level in their blood. So it couldn't be that they were getting adequate fresh water from their prey, and they were doing just fine. So all the other field observations and everything else shows, yeah, these salt glands have to be doing something. Members of the alligator family do not have these salt glands.
Oh.
So that's a big difference. So kind of the cheeky response that Greg has in his book of, how do you tell the difference between alligators and crocodiles? He says, open up their mouth and look at the tongue. If it has salt glands, it's a crocodile. So that's a pretty good one there.
And is this pretty much true across all crocodilians and alligators?
Yes, but the level of salt excretion that they play is not universal amongst the crocodiles.
Okay.
So like the freshwater crocodile or Johnston's crocodile, that one, the Australians call them freshies, that one does not have the same salt tolerance as salties and American crocodiles, but it's a crocodile.
I want to bring up something that I can't help but think about right now. So I brought up our sap episode a little bit earlier when it comes to this osmotic potential thing. And the issue with osmosis is that it's affected by the number of particles, not the overall size of the particles. So in plant hopper nymphs, inside their gut, these little monosaccharides, like single sugar molecules, are actually kind of fused together into these really, really large polysaccharides, and that decreases the number of molecules. So it reduces the osmotic potential. So the insect doesn't just explode with water, because water wants to get in where there's high osmotic potentials.
Yeah.
And they reduce that by creating many fewer and much larger molecules. I wonder if that's even possible with salt. Can the salt be combined into larger molecules, or does it just stay, as it is? Is there any chemistry going on making larger
I think Steve just volunteered to look that up for the episode notes.
Right.
I'd like you to just read the chapter of osmoregulation in that book, because they do go in a lot into the different chemistry processes, and there is some conversion and changes going on.
Okay.
So I can absolutely not explain
I'll
how
summarize.
any of that works.
I'll just summarize my question. My question is, does the salt come in and then it leaves in the same form, or does it come in, get changed, and leave in a new form?
I think it leaves in a new form.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it leaves in a new form.
Well, we'll post it in episode notes.
Yes. That's something we can look for more. Another thing too is the behavior. So in different experiments, by putting members of the crocodile family in hypersaline water, they knew instinctively not to drink it. So they would measure the mass before and after not feeding them, observing if they excreted any waste or anything, and they determined no, they're not drinking the salt water. When they put members of the alligator family, like caiman, in salt water, they were drinking it.
Seriously?
So the crocodiles knew instinctively not to do it. However, it appeared that the alligators and caimans in the experiments that were drinking salt water can learn to not do it, because when they captured wild-caught alligators and caimans living in more salty environments and tested them, they weren't drinking the salt water. So it's like they learn after a while, this isn't good for me, so they're not going to do it.
It's so dependent on where they live and what they're used to, and right?
Yeah, and it just shows the ability that they can learn that this isn't good for them.
Oh yeah, they're going to dehydrate themselves
well.
if they
exactly.
drink it. Yeah.
So that's
plus it tastes gross.
Yeah.
So that's the big kind of deal with their salt tolerance, which again, another big difference is the freshwater environments are where you're going to have the alligators in South Florida. The saltwater is where you're going to see the crocodiles. Not that there is an overlap. Alligators can live in saltwater areas, usually the bigger ones that can tolerate it more because of that ratio we mentioned earlier. And if they have access to fresh water, then they can leave a salty area and obtain access to it. Another thing that they'll do too is after heavy rainfall, they can drink the lens of fresh water at the tops of where they're living. So if they're in an area that's saltwater and you have a big rain, because of the different densities, you have a lens of fresh water at the top, and they'll take from that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm about to get into reproduction. The smaller ones, because of that ratio, can't tolerate salt as much as the bigger ones, but when they hatch during the wet season here in South Florida when you have a lot of rain.
Makes sense.
So when they're born in areas that are hypersaline, they depend on that lens of fresh water at the top. Right. So it really is interesting to see those sorts of things.
So you know what? I think alligators who aren't salt tolerant are kind of like humans, because we're also not salt tolerant. but humans can eat cup ramen, right? And if you eat 2 of those things, it's like 100% of your daily sodium, you know what I mean? So it's like, and we enjoy it. So I think, you know what, they go out there, they enjoy themselves, but then they gotta come back, you know? They gotta have that fresh water.
They gotta cleanse.
Yeah.
We've all eaten too much ramen, I think.
We're all former college students.
So this is from Dr. Frank Mazzotti, who he worked with, I believe, University of Florida. His work was featured in some articles with the Florida Wildlife Commission. He discussed kind of the general information of what goes on with their breeding. Courtship occurs in late January and February. I know for a fact that that's true because that's what I saw the other day. And then peaks about 6 to 8 weeks before nesting. During this period, crocodiles remain in their inland habitats of mangrove swamps. The courtship is pretty complex. There are different behaviors like jaw slapping, where they'll open and rapidly close their mouth at the top of the water. They'll do some bellowing, but not nearly to the extent of American alligators do. They'll also rub each other's snouts, like they'll stick their snouts up out of the water and do that, the males and females. And you know, those are the things that the males do to initiate the mating. After that, that's when they'll copulate, which occurs under the water, and it may happen repeatedly. After the courtship period and the copulation, they kind of separate and go about their business. So the principal nesting site of American crocodiles in Florida is, of course, Florida Bay, and it is more of a wet season activity that I mentioned, with eggs being laid usually around the end of April and May, and that is the start of the wet season. So again, that's why it's convenient that when the babies hatch, it's the wet season, they can drink that fresh water falling from the top there. Females lay between 20 to 60 eggs per clutch, and they'll incubate for about 85 days or so, hatching in July or early August. And you know, these are generalizations based on surveys, but of course you're going to have exceptions. Some are they're going to be earlier or later. It's going to depend on how much rainfall they've gotten that season, temperatures, where they are. There's a lot of different variables at play here.
Can I make a guess?
Sure.
You said 20 to 60 eggs?
Yes.
So I'm guessing that they have a lot of predation on the eggs, because every time I've seen young alligators, well, I know we're talking about crocodiles, but there's only like 2 or 3 of them. So I'm guessing there's a lot of, they don't make it to hatching, or maybe when they're really young, something happens.
Well, there is a lot of nest predation, you're correct, but also when they're really young, they're extremely vulnerable. And American crocodile mothers are not as good mothers as American alligator mothers are. But yeah, the survival rate of young crocodilians is very small. I mentioned all the things that eat them, you know, earlier on, but also, yes, nest predation. And I'll remind you of that when I talk about part of the reason why their success rate with nesting has increased over time.
Oh, I have one more thing to say, because what I just said could have been seen as off topic, because I was sort of talking about my experiences with alligators, because I've actually never seen baby crocodiles. So I don't know, like, do you know if alligators produce as many eggs, or is it anywhere in the ballpark?
It's highly variable depending on where they are. So like in Okefenokee, because it's a blackwater swamp, not as productive, they lay maybe about like 18.
Oh.
But, you know, they'll lay twice that if they're in more productive environments.
Okay.
So it depends on where they are, you know. But I've never, with alligators, I haven't come across the number 60.
Okay.
But you know, American crocs are bigger. It makes sense that they'd hold,
Got it.
you know, more eggs there.
So nice little alligator tangent for the comparison. So
We've been talking about American alligators throughout it, so it's totally fine. The crocodile nests are constructed so the eggs are above higher water marks, because they can't survive flooding for more than 12 hours. And that is something that kills a lot of nests as well. The different fluctuating water levels and humans coming in and causing changes in the water levels, that affected the nesting at times. So it's, you know, it's interesting. They're connected to the fluctuations of water levels there. The crocodile nest may be mounds or holes. And then after the nest construction, the female crocodiles don't really remain near the nest. However, when it gets close to the time that they hatch, the young, when they hatch, they'll make these little sounds that will alert the female croc to come over and then help them, you know, get out of the nest, crawl out and emerge from the nest site there. So that's kind of their process of reproduction there.
Can someone look under my, no, never mind. I had a mosquito on my forehead.
Oh man. So the American crocodile females have to kind of make these judgment calls. Do I pick a spot that is better for higher chances of the nest surviving, but then will be harder on the hatchlings once they emerge? Or am I going to pick a spot that is maybe not as great for the actual nest surviving, but if the hatchlings do hatch, they'll have a better chance of survival? Because again, with fluctuating salinity, temperatures, the different modifications to the habitat, it's an interesting thing, kind of all these different decisions that they have to make. Now, I did come across this study, this paper from 2022 called Natural and Anthropogenic Factors Influencing Nesting Ecology of the American Crocodile in Florida. And it was a 50-year study.
What?
Well, they took data from 50 years,
Okay.
from 1970 to 2020, to assess factors influencing the nest success of American crocodiles. They detected a change in nesting success rate increasing from maybe about 61% in the 70s to near 90% since 2010. So there's a big increase in the nest success. And part of that may be the different protecting different lands, trying to restore natural water flows. But another one that they think, because they noticed a sharp increase as you got into the 2000s, was their primary nest predator, they believe, are raccoons.
Oh,
And who's in the Everglades now?
the
Not jokingly.
Burmese python.
Burmese pythons, which are reducing small mammal populations by up to 98% in certain areas. So by raccoons being eliminated by these Burmese pythons, they think that is a big factor for an increased nesting success rate of American crocodiles. They also contribute that to the construction of these different canals and such, and ditches that change the hydrology, but over time crocodiles have learned to utilize these nesting sites, and because these canals have raised edges, they're building these nests that are near water, so better habitat, but higher above the water level, so they're not drowning out as much. So they're beginning to figure out how to utilize these man-made canals.
Wow.
So they figured that along with the decreasing population of raccoons, those are two big factors for what's been causing them to increase in their nesting success. I thought that was interesting. So do we like pythons now?
I was gonna say, Daniel is no fan of Burmese pythons,
Wait,
but
I never said I liked crocodiles.
So it just goes to show how complicated things are. But no, we are not advocates for pythons in the Everglades.
No.
So you come across a lot, you may have read, American crocodiles are not as dangerous as American alligators to people, that they're a lot shyer. And that seems to be true, probably because only the shy ones didn't get shot and killed, back then. And that does appear to be the case. But with the expansion of American crocodiles into areas where there's a little bit more human interaction, and with their numbers rising, it's going to be somewhat interesting. And Floridians are very good with coexisting with alligators and that sort of thing. But Greg himself says that crocodiles present a little bit of a different threat that they need to be aware of. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to find information on crocodilian attacks on humans and kind of compare the two, because in Florida, I believe only 3 people have ever been attacked. One was 2 individuals in one incident, and one was actually last year.
Wow.
Not long after we were here in the Flamingo Marina. And in fact, I think I know the crocodile that did it. So, and these people all survived in the Florida attack. So
last year would be 2024, folks.
yes. So I went to the Worldwide Crocodilian Attack Database, and with Alligator mississippiensis, our American alligator, from 2015 to 2024, there have been about 121 total attacks,
Wow.
16 fatal.
Wow.
And we had actually a lot in recent years. That number was a lot lower, like before 2020. So we had a kind of a string of them.
Another thing to blame on COVID.
So Crocodylus acutus, the American crocodile, 191 total, 27 fatal from about 2015 to 2024.
Could you just repeat that? What was the number?
So 191 total, 27 fatal, compared to an alligator, 121 total, 16 fatal.
And this is like in the last 9 years.
This is roughly from 2015 to 2024.
Okay.
Because I filtered it out by date. And then again, you had those 2 non-fatal incidents in Florida.
Man, that's higher than so that's higher than I thought. I thought you were gonna tell something really shocking, like sharks. Like almost no one gets attacked at all.
Well, because we're talking about American crocodiles and American alligators, I'm just showing that, yeah, American crocodiles can be dangerous too.
Right.
You know, you got to treat them with respect. So this whole thing, they don't attack people like alligators do. First of all, alligators, again, you know, they don't want anything to do with people either. For the vast majority of instances, when you get larger individuals that are habituated or being fed by people, that's when it increases the likelihood. So I say the chance isn't zero, it's always low of an alligator attack, but it can increase in certain situations, like when you feed them, where they become habituated, or you're swimming at night where an alligator's been fed.
Or you're getting too close to get a picture, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about being respectful and observing from a distance, but crocodiles have killed more people, American crocodiles that is, but you got to remember they have a wide range. And you know, these are places like Panama and Mexico and Costa Rica, like that's where this has been happening. To put it in perspective, the two crocodiles that give all crocodiles a scary name, Crocodylus porosus, in that time period, 996 fatalities.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's the saltwater crocodile. The Crocodylus niloticus, the Nile crocodile, about 800.
Wow.
So those are the two famous. It is, but you also need to understand that it's different. These are countries that depend more heavily on direct contact with the river. You know, that's where they get their water for drinking. That's where they clean their clothes. You know, they depend on that sort of thing.
These people are living kind of in and amongst these.
They don't have a choice.
Yeah.
They don't have it. Why are they going near the water's edge?
And those
we're talking about people that out of obligation.
And those crocodiles have evolved to feed on mammals. They're predators of mammals, right? Whereas ours aren't as much.
Not so much.
Yes, no, not to the same degree at all. Especially the Nile croc. Like it hunts water holes for large animals.
Yeah.
So you see videos of them taking down zebras and like big things like that. So now about that last attack that happened in March, because that happened like a month after we were here, and it happened in the Flamingo Marina, where we observed a large American crocodile that was missing the lower half of his jaw. So they call them half jaw. Now this individual who survived, he capsized his sailboat in the Marina Basin and fell into the water, and while trying to swim ashore, the croc grabbed him on the leg and let him go not long after. So he had some injuries, but he survived. Now these crocodiles, along with the sharks in the marina, they learned that people fish there on their boats, and it's easier to catch a fish that's at the end of someone's line. So that croc was probably around the boat, and then when it heard splashing, might have thought that there was a fish there. So that's kind of my interpretation of it, especially because he let go long after. Now, from the Palm Beach Post, it said, rangers and park biologists are continuing to investigate the incident and monitor the suspected crocodile, which is easily identifiable. So between that and the fact that you're not going to have a lot of overlap with large males in around the breeding season, you know, in that area, that makes me think that maybe it was half jaw, but it might not have been. Who knows?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the same notion that we talk about whenever we do an episode on our apex predators is we got to learn to be respectful and coexist with them, because it's a lot worse not having them. Let's get along with things that might be a little bit inconvenient to us out in nature.
And try not to fall out of your boat in the marina.
Now, do we want to head to, I know we spent a lot of time talking. Do you want to head to the Flamingo Marina?
Sure.
See if the crocs are there?
Yeah, let's go.
Cool. And then if we get there, I can tell you that story that I mentioned.
I want to make sure to mention, again, we want to thank our patrons for making this episode possible and a number of special episodes that we did this year. And I'm sure Steve will agree with me that we want to say a special thank you to Daniel for his enthusiasm joining us really just at the beginning of 2000, or a little before the beginning of 2024. And with Daniel's enthusiasm and hard work, we have put out more episodes in 2024 than we've put out in many, many years.
Very nice.
So we're going to officially rename it the Daniel Show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to lose all your listeners.
The Daniel Show featuring two other guys.
Yeah.
So folks, we just made our way down to the Flamingo Marina, and we got the result that we were hoping for. Bill, Steve, and I are currently looking at a large male American crocodile sunning himself right on the boat ramp, and this is that big one, probably about 13 feet long. His jaws are agape, we can see all of his teeth. There's a crowd of impressed onlookers, and it is quite the sight. So again, we got our target species here.
Sweet.
My quick story was, I came here a few days ago, and this big bull was right next to a female. It's now the courtship season. And I watched them do nothing for about 45 minutes. And I was like, maybe something cool will happen. Maybe I'll get a picture of the bull walking. I mean, who knows? But I really had to pee. So I went to the bathroom, which is on the other side of the marina. And when I finally made my way over there, I heard an onlooker go, "Oh, the crocs are in the water." And there they were, the bull and his mate, snouts up in the air, full courtship display, rubbing each other's snouts. The male was smashing his jaws, opening and closing them on the top of the water. He was blowing bubbles. He bellowed a little bit, all in perfect sunlight. It would have made a tremendous photo. I missed all of it because I had to pee. By the time I came back, they were under the water mating. The male popped up first. He had a cigarette in his mouth, and then he swam over to the other side of the near the Buttonwood Canal there. But it was quite a cool thing to see. Sad I missed it for photography purposes, but
amazing.
So what a way to end up seeing this dinosaur-looking animal here. So.
All right, folks. What we're going to do, we did not put a wrap-up together. Steve and I were totally focused on getting down here to Florida, but we will do a wrap-up when we return to Western New York, and we're hoping to have this episode out by the end of January 2025.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right, see you next time.
See you next
Happy New
time.
Year.
All right, everyone. I'm back in Western New York, and instead of walking on the sunlit trails in southern Florida, I am here in the snow-covered trails of Western New York. We are actually in the midst of an exceptionally long bout of winter, which we haven't had here in Western New York for a number of years. Shout out to our subnivean layer zone. We actually have a subnivean layer this year for the critters to be hanging out in under the snow. But it is my job to do today's wrap-up. Daniel has been extremely busy doing environmental ed, and Steve has been busy doing Steve things. So first and foremost, we'd like to thank our growing list of Patreon supporters. So thank you to our new patrons, Val H. and Andy W. We also like to give a shout out each month to our top patrons. So stick around for the end of the episode to hear my daughter Violet share that list. And remember, if you'd like to be part of the Field Guides and read our patron list in a future episode, email us at thefieldguides@gmail.com. We want to give a shout out to bluegrass.botany on Instagram. They had done a post recently on Phytolacca americana, which many of us know as pokeweed, and they were kind enough to give people, or I should say to point people in the direction of our episode on pokeweed. And if you'd like to support the podcast, consider becoming a patron of our show at patreon.com. As a patron, you'll get access to a special patrons-only version of the episode that includes me sharing the episode notes. Because of support from our listeners, we've been able to keep the show free and make cooler episodes like this one. Or you can make a one-time donation through PayPal on our website. And we want to give a very, very big thank you to listener Thomas W. for his overwhelmingly generous donation this past December. Thank you so much, Thomas. It really surprised all three of us, and we will do our best to live up to your support. And don't forget that we have Field Guides merch available through our website store at thefieldguidespodcast.com. Remember, if you can't financially support the podcast, you can help out by sharing it with friends and family and by subscribing and leaving us a review wherever you get your podcasts. It helps spread the word and allows us to reach a wider audience. We'd like to thank our newest iTunes reviewer, Environmentally Friendly. Come enjoy our sporadic posts on Blue Sky, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can always email us ideas for episode topics, criticisms, or your stories of personal encounters with crocodiles to thefieldguides@gmail.com. And remember, parents, get those kids outside. Let them flip over rocks and logs. Let them get muddy and dirty and snowy. And if you don't have kids, please make time to get yourself outside as well. All right, stick around to hear Violet reading our patrons, and we'll see you next time. And here's Violet with this episode's top patrons.
Eric, Alyssa, Adam, Mary, Dr. Judy, Kimberly B., Peter R., Callie, Rich K., the Hebranks, Orange Julianne, Daniel M., Diane, we named the dog Indy, Hot Dog Cold Weather, Dwayne H., Jennifer D., Jonathan A., Val, Andy W., Elizabeth P., Picasso 3, John R., Evan, Mark T., Cecilia, Julie B., Dennis, Chris N., Sung, Jeff S., Colin G., Jonathan K., Matt E., Plants in My Pants, Sean M., Ryan R., Sophie S., Connor H., Measure and Principle, Fragaria pepaloinoidea, Outside Chronicles, Andrew C., Quixote, Matt D, Melissa Marie and Dusty AZ, Kelly S, Sarah S, Helen A, Judy F, Ben C, Jane H, Doodle Dude 82, Galen Mac, Kazzies, Esther C, John W, Mark V, Bethany H, Rob M.
Way to go.
That's a lot.
On behalf of Daniel and Steve patrons, thank you so much for your support. As I mentioned in the episode, this past year, 2024, we've put out more episodes than we have in a long time. And because of your support, we've been able to bring many of Daniel's enthusiastic ideas to life. So thanks again, and we'll keep putting out episodes as often as we can.
Goodbye.